This is crazy. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the Potter Podcast. And as promised, I've got some good stuff for you, especially on this one. I kind of spoke about it in the last podcast that I did there for you guys, and now I'm going to touch on a lot of these things. And it actually came out of a conversation I was having with some friends, and we were kind of going back and forth talking about our different jobs and industries and different things. And one of the questions was asked to me that said, what's the most challenging part of your job? And I had to sit there and think about that for a second, and then all these things started coming to mind. And so I was like, I don't think I can do just one thing. But let me hit on a couple things that I think a lot of people don't know. And sometimes I think a lot of agents don't want to talk about these things because they don't want to have their clients know about it, or their friends know about it, or their peers or coworkers or whoever the case is. But as you guys know, I'm an open book, and so I talk about this stuff openly and freely. I'm not ashamed of it. I am not gonna ever hide anything or sugarcoat anything. I just want to be transparent and open and honest, and sometimes that can come off as maybe offending someone, or me venting or anything like that. But hopefully everyone understands and will see the heart behind this, and will kind of relate with me, and maybe there's things that you can relate with your job, and then maybe there's other things that I might say that you're like, wow, I had no idea as it pertains to what he does. Because I think a lot of times, I think this is with any industry. I don't think it's just with real estate, and I don't think it's just with me in general or anything like that. I think these are all things that we as agents struggle with and are challenged with on a daily basis and a yearly basis. And but I don't think it's something that is necessarily just specifically towards the real estate industry. I think there's a lot of people that will relate because they'll deal with some of the same things. But then, like I said, I think there might be some other things that may not relate to other people, and I'll get into some examples of that. But so anyways, back to the question, and as we embark on this episode here, I just wanted to share with you guys some things that, as I deal with the question, what is it that's most challenging about being a real estate agent? And so I just started writing down things that started coming to mind. And again, this may not be for every real estate agent. This is just me and what I think and what's been challenging for me as I've been doing this almost a decade now, which is crazy to think about. And so some of the first things that come to mind obviously are, number one, financial stress. I think there's a lot of financial stress that my job involves, not always even with me, but with clients as well, because again, you're dealing with someone's probably one of the most, if not the most, biggest assets that they'll ever own. And so I think when you're doing that, and when you're working with somebody that's going to buy a house, it's not just like you're going to buy a car, or you're going to buy a stick of gum, or filling your car up with gas, or any of the, it's a big purchase. And so, it's funny as I think about, even when I'm in high school, and I think about what's the biggest thing that I had to purchase in high school that I thought was a lot of money, right? And the thing that kind of comes to mind is when I bought my first PlayStation, I think back and I'm just like, man, that was so, in my high school mind and eyes, it was man, that thing is so expensive. I'm going to have to save up and mow a ton of yards to get there and be able to purchase that thing. But I worked hard and was able to do it. And, looking back, it's it was, I don't know, a couple $100 at the time. And you look back at that and you're like, man, a couple $100, isn't that much money nowadays. But it was for me at the time, right? But as we get older, things continue to progress, and things continue to get more expensive. And as we make more money, we spend more money. And so as it comes to owning a house, though, like everybody wants to own a house, especially if you've been renting for a long time. You're tired of paying rent to your landlord, and you're like, I want to own something that's mine. Like, I want to put money into something and get a return on that. And so real estate is one of those things that can happen. And but I think with that comes a lot of, like I said, financial stress, because there's so many things to think about as you're going through that process. And you're thinking about, like, well, how much money do I need to get saved up for a down payment, and how much are my closing costs going to be? And then you start dealing with other things that kind of go along with that, like interest rates and getting locked into your loan and your rate, so that you know kind of where that monthly payment's going to be, and all those things. And so I think it's interesting, as I think about that, like, it's not just financial stress from like my perspective as a real estate agent, but it's also a lot of financial stress for the client and the person buying a house as well. And just trying to get through those things and those obstacles to get to a point where you're ready to buy and you close on a house. And I think from a real estate perspective, for me personally, you hear people talk about this all the time, and like, real estate is a roller coaster. And so it's one of those things where it's so true. Like, you have these ebbs and flows and these ups and downs of every year. And so, like, the thing that I have seen in my business that I would love to get more steady in, I just haven't been able to find that solution, just because I think there are some things that play into it, whether that's weather, or it's just different things that are out of your control. But I think what's interesting is there's always like 2 months out of the year that I have that are like really good months, where I tend to do more sales or get homes under contract in those 2 months out of the entire year. And then the rest of those months are kind of like ebbs and flows. Like, 1 year it might be like, hey, I got 6 or 7 sales in that month, and then the next year it's like I got 1 or 2. And it's trying to track that and figure out, like, okay, why was that? Was I more productive with my time and with my prospecting and other things in this previous quarter than I was this quarter? Or what is that, and what does that mean, and what will that do for my future? And sometimes, like I said, there's a lot of things that are out of your control. But I think that's a stressful thing when it comes to a lot of people when they're getting involved. And I will say, like, that was the number one thing I was concerned about when I first got involved with real estate, because you go from being on salary to now I'm 100% commission, which means that, like, I could be putting in a ton of hours every single week and not getting paid for it if I'm not closing properties. And so, like, that was a huge obstacle, and is still, I would say, a huge challenge for any person that's in sales, and especially with them being on 100% commission, is that there's always this constant, like, battle inside your mind or going on behind closed doors of, like, oh man, I've got to get some more production going, or this business isn't going to last, right? And so, like, there's this constant, I would say, not fear is not the right word, or scared, but I would say that, like, the constant challenge of knowing that, like, I can't let my foot off the gas, because if I do, I could put myself and my team in a position that would be difficult to be in, and I would never want to close down my business or anything because of something that I could kind of control, right? And so you got to be really productive with your time, but I don't think that at least for me so far, like, has not been able to reduce that financial stress. Like, it comes and goes. Obviously, like, when you have slower months versus, like, when you're busy and constantly going. But the reality is, like, you're not constantly going all the time. Like, you have months where you are really busy, but then you have months that are really slow. And I think it's in those slow months where you have time to think and process things, and you're not constantly running and going, that you realize, man, like, I have this constant struggle of like wanting to and not thinking about not being able to provide for my family or things like that. And so it's just weird. It's crazy like to think about, but I think people that are in sales or that have done sales like know what I'm talking about. But I don't think a lot of people, when they think about a real estate agent, they don't think about maybe the stress factor that's in that. Now I will say this, like, you can tell when there are agents that are, I hate saying this word, but like desperate, where you see them going into listing appointments and they're like, oh, I'll list your house for 2% or 3% or whatever, and it's crazy to me when I think about that stuff. But that like screams like desperation to me. Like that screams that like, man, they don't believe in the value that they're providing. They're just trying to get a transaction done so that they can continue to move on and live another day or live another month. Whereas it's like, man, if you really focus on providing a value and you know what you're worth, then you don't have to go to that level. You can actually say like, no, I believe in the services that I provide. And so that's why I can go into a listing appointment when somebody's, if I'm going up against somebody that's doing like a 4% listing, I'm like, I'm not going to match that. Like, that's just, I'm not willing to go that low. And it has nothing to do with wanting to make more money or anything like that. It just has everything to do with what I know what I know I'm worth and what my time is worth. But also the value that I bring to the table for my clients and the amount of money and the amount of time that I spend in resources to make sure that I'm giving my clients the best service and the best systems and the best team that I possibly can when we're going through a transaction. And so like with that comes service, like again, you'll hear me say this over and over. I say it so many times, like you get what you pay for. And a lot of times I don't think people understand that until they actually go through it. And then I can't tell you how many times I've had people that will say to me when they chose somebody else that did a lower commission, or they ended up going with a for sale by owner or whatever the case is where it didn't involve me, and then they say, we should have just listened to you and we should have just used you. And my heart like breaks for that situation, because I'm like, man, I wish you guys would have just trusted me and would have just understood like the value. And now you do understand the value that I provide when it comes to that and bringing that to the table. But sometimes you just have to go through it, right? Sometimes you just have to experience it until you know, like, man, next time I'm not going to make that mistake again. Like, I'll pay more because of the experience or the brand or the longer the material lasts or whatever it is for those things that you like figure out, that you're willing to spend more money because you know the outcome is going to be better, or that they're going to get you more money, net you more money on the listing of your house, or any of those things, right? Like there's numerous stories that we could share about that. But so yeah, like I just think that financial stress is one of those things. I think what goes along with that, another thing that came to mind was like emotional stress, right? Like there's so many emotions that are going on throughout a transaction. And so like I used to joke with people all the time, but like it's true. I'm like, I'm not just a real estate agent that goes and like helps someone buy or sell a home. Like sometimes I am someone who is a counselor. Sometimes I am someone who's a psychiatrist. Sometimes I'm someone who's an educator and a teacher, and I'm walking someone through that process. Like there's all these different hats that I feel like we wear that people are unaware about. But like when you're dealing with lots and lots of money, you tend to start bringing in a lot of these other different emotions, right? And so like our job is to basically brace those emotions. And I believe that's a part of being like a really good real estate agent, is being able to read people, listen to people, find out where these people are coming from and what their challenges are and why they're feeling the way they are, and then be that rock or that person to bounce that stuff off to, vent that stuff to, and then come up with a solution and help walk through that process. And I feel like that's just a key area that like a lot of agents miss out on. And then that's why they get negative reviews, and that's why they get all these things, because again, they're focused on just the transaction and wanting to get it done. And it's like, there's more to it than that. Like, it's, if people understood, I think in our industry, if people understood that this was all about more than just a transaction, but it was about a relationship and a long-lasting, long-term relationship, I think they'd be a lot more successful. And so that's how I approach when I'm working with clients. It's like, I want to get to know that person. I will spend 2 hours at a listing appointment sometimes because I'm getting to know them and their family. I'm not putting a time limit like some agents do, where they're like, all right, I'm in and out in 30 minutes in a listing appointment. It's like, when I hear that, I'm like, dude, like, are you about the transaction, or are you about getting to know your client? And I don't, it's pretty difficult when you think about like a 30-minute conversation in and out, going over everything that you're going to do and answering all their questions. Like, in my mind, that's pretty difficult to do. Like, but again, to each their own. Everybody has their own routine. But I don't set any time limits when I'm going to meet with people, because I don't know how long that's going to last. I don't know what their needs are, or their concerns are, or what their real estate goals are, until I actually sit down and have a conversation with them and can start walking them through that. So I think there's just this emotional stress because sometimes you're dealing with a divorced couple, right? Like, sometimes you're dealing with someone that just lost someone that they loved, and now they have to sell the house. Like, there's all these different scenarios where these emotions are being brought in. From an agent's perspective, like, sometimes we have to deal with unethical agents on the other end, and that's never fun. Like, it's never fun to sit here and have to go to bat and go to negotiate and go to fight and go do all these things for our clients, when on the other end, like, you got an unethical agent that's like not listening, that's doing their own thing, that doesn't care about your party, that's doing things that are potentially illegal in some instances, or didn't disclose something that they should have disclosed, or all these different things, right? Like, and that can be emotional, right? Like, that can be emotional because, at least for me, when I'm representing my clients, like, they're my family. And so, like, when you wrong my family, like, now I'm pissed off, and now I'm angry, and now I'm trying to come up with a solution. But if you're not willing to work with me, like, there's this other emotional level of stress that can take place, and it's never fun. But you, like, get through it, and it's part of the job. And I always tell people, I'm like, 90% of my transactions are great and they're smooth, and like, I love working with the other agent on the end. 10%, sometimes you're dealing with a little bit more stress and a little bit more things because of the inexperienced, or because of just this unethical person, or even like this prideful person. Like, I cannot stand working with other agents that are like so prideful. Like, they think they know everything. They think they have a solution to everything, and if you don't agree with that solution, then you're wrong, and then they completely cut you off, and now things are like not going as smoothly as they could be if you would just work through it together. So again, like, there's those things. I think a huge thing that I thought about, that we've had a conversation with our team and numerous people within the industry all the time, is losing clients to other agents. Specifically, some of those clients being like our closest friends or personal connections. And I think for me, like, the reason I get so upset, or the reason I get so down on myself or whatever, I start thinking about, like, well, what could I have done better? Like, what could I have said differently? What could I have, done differently that would have maybe changed the scenario? And, you go through all these things, and you beat yourself up, and you do all these things emotionally, and you just try to figure out, like, how you do a better job, like, next time, when a lot of times it has nothing to do with you. It's just these people just decided to use someone else or go with someone else for some reason. But I think it hurts a lot more because you you expect those people that are closest to you and that your friends to use you, because in my mind, I'm going to do the same thing in my life, right? So like if I have a friend that's involved in a specific sort of business, like I'm going to want to bring them the business, right? Like I was just having a conversation with a friend today, and he was like, hey, I just left my job and I'm starting on this new endeavor, and I'm gonna go this route, like in the financial world of like helping people make better financial decisions, and teaching them how to budget their money and do those types of things and invest differently, and to think about just the breakdown of like their money and where it's going and when it's coming in and when it's going out. And I was like, dude, whatever I can do to help you grow your business, let me know. Like, let's grab coffee and let's talk about how we can help each other grow each other's businesses, because I want to see him thrive. Like that's a passion of his. It's been a passion of his for years. And so for me, I was like, man, I want that guy to be successful, and I'll do everything I can to like help him out. And so that's just my mindset. So I think a lot of times, like when people don't share that same mindset, you take it a lot harder, and it's a lot more difficult to deal with. Now I try to tell myself, like, okay, be upset about it, pout about it, be a little hurt about it for a couple hours, but then it's time to move on. Like, you can't sit here and mope about it and sit in it for days or weeks or months, because it just takes an effect on everything else in your life. And so, I think that's one challenge, and that's one difficult thing. Like, you've heard me talk about like the loyalty gap in other podcasts, and I would say that's where that aligns best. And so like, I think there's just that challenge that will always be there, but it's still like an emotional stress of like always beating ourselves up with that question of like, what could I have done better? And at the end of the day, most cases, you couldn't have done anything better. Just, it is what it is, and you just have to move on. And not take it personal, which is easier said than done, for sure. I think another thing with like emotional stress that I wrote down was like always being available. I think like there's this, and it's, again, I don't think it's just in real estate, but I think like with where we're at in the world today, like a lot of people just like, they want things now, right? Like, I just sent you a text message. Why didn't you respond right now? I called you and you didn't answer. Like, what's going on? Like, as if we've got nothing else going on in our lives, and we're sitting there waiting for our phone to ring or our phone to vibrate for a text, and like we have nothing else to do with our life right now. Like that, but it's crazy to me to think about like how we function in this world today, where, man, like there are times where I have to unplug. Like I haven't seen my kids. Like I don't know, right now it's 9:30 at night as I'm recording this podcast. And I haven't been home yet, and I've seen my kids today for maybe a combined total of 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I've seen my wife for the same amount of time there, and then it's like I haven't been home, and people don't see that side of it, right? Where there's times where there's a lot of late nights, and there's a lot of running around, and there's a lot of sacrifice that's made to be available for everyone, because the reality is, in my line of work, in my job, most people are at work from 8 to 5. And so, like, when do people want to go see houses, or when do people start reaching out or communicating? It's after 5 o'clock and at night and on the weekends and things like that. And so that comes with the job. Like, I'm not sitting here whining and complaining about that. I'm not. So please hear my heart on that. Like, I love being able to be available and help people, right? But I think one thing that's hard from like my perspective is like the emotional stress of trying to balance like being available for family, which should be all the time, right? And being available to clients, which we say is all the time. And so we're constantly on call 24/7, 365 with one of those two things, right? Like, so it's this constant like pull and battle between going back and forth between trying to please the client and please our family. And like whoever talked about or thought about like life balance, like there's no such thing. I don't believe there's any such thing as being able to balance like family time and business. Like if you're trying to run your own business, there's no way that you're going to spend the same amount of hours running that business and the same amount at home with the family. Like there's not enough time in the day to do that. And so you have to start finding ways. Like people ask me all the time, like, man, your team's always growing and you're adding these people and you're adding these admin positions and all these different things. Like, how can you afford to do that? And I'm like, listen, I've decided that if I'm gonna want to spend more time with my family and be present at my kids' events like baseball games, basketball games, gymnastics, and things like that my kids are involved in, I'm gonna have to substitute that time, right, for somebody else that's available or that can work on some of those things while I'm present at those things. Why? Because it's more important for me to be involved in my kid's life than it is to go out and be at the office sometimes working on something or prospecting or doing. Those things are important, yes, but like my family time and spending time with my kids is more important to me than being at the office 24/7, 365 as well. So like there's a difference there. Like I could go do 35, 40 million in volume if I wanted to and never see my family. But then I think that is a unhealthy marriage and an unhealthy relationship with my kids that's going to probably result in a divorce, or it's going to result in an unhealthy relationship with the two people or the people that I love the most. And for what? To make more money? Like that stuff just doesn't sit right with me. And so, again, to each their own, but like, I'm just being real. Like that's an emotional stress sometimes where it's like, I don't want to be away from my family right now. But like, I know that there's sometimes where there has to be a sacrifice made where I'm working on the brand, I'm working on the business, I'm working on training material, I'm working on prospecting for my business where like, I have to go and work late night sometimes and it sucks, but it's also like a sacrifice that we're willing to make because we have goals and we want to reach those goals. So anyways, I think that's just, one of my agents said to me the other day, like, it broke my heart, but I was like, it's the reality. Like she was just telling me like, like I was working on my birthday, like I'm in the middle of blowing out the candles on my cake and my phone rings and I had a client that wanted to go see a house and wanted to go do this. And like, she had the option, right, of saying no, but like she wanted to be available for that person available at that time. And so like, she left and she went on her way and she did this thing like on her birthday with a client and it was great and it's fine. And I'm not really sure. I forgot to ask her if she got that house under contract on her birthday, which would be a good birthday present. But again, like those are the things where there's times where there's sacrifices that are being made that a lot of people don't see. But again, is a part of our job, right? Like we choose to do that. But I think like there's times where like people don't see that and they don't, I don't know the word I'm looking for, like they're not thankful for like that time. So if you're working with an agent, like thank them for the time that they're spending with you, because you never know like if they're stepping away from their kids' birthday parties or whatever the case is to go show you that house or to go work with you. That's all I'm saying. Again, it's a part of our job. I'm not whining or complaining about it. I'm just being real with you. There's that emotional stress there of like balancing life and family and business. Like that's all I'm saying. Another thing that like came to mind was like time. Like, this is a difficult one because I think again it goes into what I was just saying, and even what I was just sharing is like we don't get paid until we close on a house, and so like the amount of hours spent or put in for us as real estate agents doesn't equate to equal pay. So like it's really challenging sometimes and it's hard where, I'll be like, man, I put in like 60 hours this week and like I was out busting my butt and showing houses and going out and doing all these things. And meeting with people and networking and working on training for my team and meeting with people on my team and helping them put out fires and like dealing with my own fires and all this stuff. And it's like, but I didn't get paid for any of it. Not yet. But like, there are some weeks where it's like, some weeks will pass and some months will pass where it's like, man, I didn't have anything that closed. And I didn't get paid like this week or this month or whatever the case is. And so that I think is